Tonight in this deep dive, we're looking at the invisible ledger you carry with you every single day. The quiet, unwritten rules that govern not just your bank account, but your sense of safety in the world.
Right. We are going to explore the hidden architecture of our financial lives. We really want to understand why we do what we do with money and, why our most baffling behaviors actually make perfect human sense when you look at the blueprint underneath.
Exactly. We have gathered a really fascinating stack of behavioral science, psychological research, and financial therapy studies, and we have custom tailored this exploration specifically for you. The mission here is to unpack the human picture beneath the numbers.
Yeah, to really get to the bottom of it.
And to do that, I want to start with a very specific quiet moment. It is drawn directly from the work of the Caller Financial Group, and it takes place in a completely ordinary living room on a Tuesday evening.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Right, so let us picture a couple, Dustin and Emily. Dustin is sitting on the couch, watching television, maybe mindlessly scrolling on his phone. He's perfectly content. The house is calm. Emily walks into the room. She leans against the doorframe and says simply, "The orthodontist says Jennifer needs braces. We need to talk about how to pay for that."
Which is, a completely standard domestic conversation. There's no aggression in her tone. It is literally just a logistical reality of parenting.
Completely. But Dustin's reaction is anything but standard. His heart rate immediately spikes. His posture shifts. He sits up, raises his voice, and gets instantly defensive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he snaps back. "What do you mean braces? You think I can afford that? There's nothing wrong with her teeth. We aren't going to fork over a couple $1,000 just to help the damn dentist buy his new Mercedes."
Wow, that escalated quickly.
Right. And Emily, naturally taken aback by this sudden hostility, she snaps back that it isn't her fault the kid needs braces, and she accuses him of never wanting to spend anything on their children. And just like that, the living room is an absolute war zone.
And if we look at that exchange, purely on the surface, it looks like a fight about orthodontics. It looks like a disagreement about, a medical expense or household budgeting.
Right, a money fight.
Exactly. But if you watch closely, you realize it is actually not about orthodontics at all.
No, not at all. When we look beneath the argument, we find an echo from the past. When Emily asked about paying for braces, Dustin did not actually hear his wife making a request in the present moment.
He heard something else entirely.
He did. What he heard was his mother, 30 years ago, standing in a cramped kitchen, telling him that no, he could not join the middle school basketball team because they made you buy specific shoes and uniforms, and the family was simply too poor to afford it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he heard the shame of that moment. Or maybe he heard his father, exhausted after a long shift, denigrating professionals, bitterly saying that doctors and lawyers only care about lining their own pockets while working class people suffer.
And, in the mental health field, this dynamic is referred to as unfinished business.
Unfinished business.
Right. When we carry unresolved emotional pain related to past events, our ability to differentiate between what is actually threatening in the present moment and what was threatening in the past, it just becomes impaired. The boundary completely blurs.
So he's not even reacting to Emily?
Exactly. Dustin is experiencing an intensely unbalanced reaction to a current situation because of unexplored thoughts and feelings. His nervous system cannot tell the difference between a dental bill today and the profound childhood shame of poverty.
He is suddenly transported back to feeling deprived, helpless, and just, well, small. And because the human brain needs to make sense of sudden, overwhelming emotion, he attributes all of those painful feelings to the person standing right in front of him.
Which happens to be his wife.
Right. He feels like she is nagging him, telling him he is inadequate, telling him he doesn't earn enough to provide. But think about the logistics for a second. He doesn't even know what the braces cost yet.
He hasn't looked at the bill.
He hasn't looked into their dental insurance coverage. He hasn't asked about a payment plan. He is completely bypassing his logical brain. He is just reacting to the ghost in the room.
And if we connect this scene directly to you, the listener, it might start to feel uncomfortably familiar. How many times have you looked at a bank balance, even completely positive one where all your bills are covered, and felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of tightness in your chest?
Or anxiety in your stomach.
Exactly. Or maybe found yourself hiding a shopping bag in the trunk of your car before walking into your own house, even though the purchase was completely within your budget.
Oh, that's such a common one. Or perhaps you have felt an overwhelming, almost physical urge to pick up a dinner tab for a table full of friends, a tab that you objectively knew you could not afford, just because the silence when the check arrived felt too dangerous.
We all carry this weight. We all have these intense automatic reactions that seem to just bypass our frontal lobes entirely. We feel the heavy emotional baggage, the sudden urge to hide, to fight, or to appease, long before we even know what to call the phenomenon.
Which brings us to the first major revelation of our sources. There is actually a clinical name for this invisible architecture. The core idea we're talking about here is something called money scripts.
Money scripts, it's such a perfect term for it.
It really is. So what exactly are they?
Well, money scripts are, at their core, unconscious beliefs that each of us has developed concerning money and life. They are the silent operating system running in the background of our minds.
Like invisible software.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And they're most commonly formed very early in childhood. They are shaped by direct messages we receive from our parents, like money doesn't grow on trees, but also by our socioeconomic circumstances, society, and the indirect observations we make.
So it's not always spoken.
No, not at all. A child watching their parents whisper anxiously at the kitchen table over a stack of bills learns a script about money and fear, even if no one ever says a single word to them directly.
And because we are children, when this coding happens, we internalize these messages using the immature, magical thinking of childhood. We are just trying to make sense of a massive, unpredictable world. So these scripts aren't nuanced.
Right, they are very black and white.
Yeah, they are formed at a deep primal level and become part of our entire worldview, our schema. They are developed fundamentally for survival and protection.
That survival aspect is just vital. We adopt these beliefs to keep ourselves safe in whatever specific environment we happen to be growing up in.
It makes me think of an analogy. Imagine you are building a house. The foundation for this house was poured before you were even old enough to walk. You had absolutely no say in the concrete, no say in the leveling.
You're just a kid.
Right. And as you grow up, you just keep building. You add 2x4s, you pound nails, you frame out the living room, you paint the walls. You never realize the foundation itself is tilted. But years later, the doors stop closing properly, the floors start to sag.
I love that visualization, because what do we do when the door stops closing? We don't check the foundation. We blame the door.
We buy a sander.
Exactly. We buy a sander and shave down the wood. We spend hours researching new heavy-duty hinges. We fight with our partner about who keeps slamming the door and breaking it.
Yeah, that's so true.
In our financial lives, shaving down the door is making a strict, new budgeting spreadsheet. It is downloading a new expense tracking app. It will not work because the foundation is still sinking. You never had a structural inspection of your financial foundation before you started building your adult life.
And our sources show that these scripts, this foundation, are very often incomplete. They are conflicting, or they represent only partial truths. They are entirely bound to the specific context in which they were created.
They don't update automatically.
No, they don't. The Collar research gives a really provocative example of this. They talk about the deeply held script that inherited wealth is bad.
That is a very common one. And when someone holds that script, they view it as a moral absolute. It is not an opinion to them. It is a fact of nature.
Right. And within that script, there are absolutely grains of truth. We can all point to the destructive behavior of certain celebrity heirs or trust fund kids acting entitled to validate that belief. The brain loves that validation.
It definitely does.
But there are also massive grains of falsehood. The existence of enormous charitable foundations or families who quietly use generational wealth to fund medical research or community arts demonstrates that many people who inherit wealth manage it responsibly and use it as a tool for immense good.
Yet when we adopt a money script, we strip away all of that nuance. We view it in an all-or-nothing black and white fashion. We adopt it as an absolute law of the universe, because absolute laws require much less cognitive load to process than complex realities.
So we act like actors who have memorized our lines perfectly. We know the script, we've completely integrated the character, and we just play it out automatically on stage.
We don't even think about it.
Exactly. But we never stop to look around and ask if we are even in the same play anymore. We are shouting lines from a tragedy while standing on the set of a modern comedy. We use these scripts without ever examining whether they fit the circumstances, the income level, or the relationships we currently have.
And we often blindly follow them until they simply stop working, causing massive relational or financial damage. Yet even then, we continue to follow them. We sit there wondering what is wrong with the rest of the world, completely missing the fact that our own deepest held beliefs might be the root of the friction.
So from understanding what these scripts are fundamentally, we have to move into the actual science. We know it feels like an emotional reflex, but how deeply are these scripts wired into our biology and our psychology?
Well, to understand the mechanics of that, we turn to the behavioral science. Back in 2011, researchers Brad Klontz and his team wanted to see if they could actually quantify these invisible scripts.
Right, put some data behind it.
Exactly. They developed something called the Klontz Money Script Inventory, or the KMSI. They administered an exhaustive list of money beliefs to hundreds of subjects. And they didn't just look for trends, they used rigorous statistical modeling to group these beliefs.
And what did they find?
What emerged were four distinct, scientifically valid patterns of money scripts that drive almost all of our financial behavior.
4 core blueprints. Let's
Yeah.
really dig into these because as I was reading the source material, the mechanisms behind them just blew my mind. The first one is called money avoidance.
Yes, money avoidance is the deeply held belief that money is inherently bad, that it causes anxiety, that rich people are greedy by definition, or, and this is the most painful one, that you personally do not deserve money.
That is so heavy.
It is. Unsurprisingly, the research found this script is strongly associated with lower levels of education, lower income, and lower net worth.
But the why is what is so fascinating. The researchers note that money avoidance predicts self-defeating behaviors like financial denial.
Like literally refusing to open bank statements.
Yes, and financial enabling, like giving money to adult children even when it bankrupts you. But the wildest finding to me was that money avoidance strongly predicts workaholism.
It sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? I mean, if you avoid money, why would you work all the time?
Exactly. But when you look at the mechanism, it makes perfect tragic sense. Let's say you are a freelance graphic designer and your core script is that asking for money is greedy or dirty. You will subconsciously, chronically undercharge for your services.
You practically give it away.
You might give your time away for free to clients who ask for favors. Because you are avoiding the healthy accumulation of money, you are constantly broke. To survive, to just make rent, you end up having to work 80 hours a week.
Wow.
The workaholism isn't because you love money. The workaholism is a direct mathematical symptom of the avoidance.
That is a brilliant breakdown of the mechanism. The study even noted that mental health professionals and people in helping professions tend to score exceptionally high in money avoidance. They carry a societal script that to be a good and caring person means you shouldn't care about compensation.
Okay, so that is avoidance. What is the second pattern?
The second pattern is the polar opposite, money worship.
Ah, okay.
This is the belief that more money will magically solve all of your problems. The core thought is, things would finally be okay. I would finally be happy if I just had a little more money.
Yeah, and you would think that people who worship money would hoard it, right, to
Yeah.
get as much as possible, but the data shows the exact opposite.
Right. The research links money worship to lower income and net worth, but significantly higher levels of revolving credit card debt. It strongly predicts compulsive buying disorder.
Because if you worship the feeling of financial salvation, you try to manufacture that feeling by spending. You feel empty or anxious, so you go online, you buy something, and you get that tiny fleeting spike of dopamine.
Just for a second.
For a brief second, you feel the salvation that the money script promised. But then the item arrives, the feeling fades, and you are just left with the debt. So you have to buy something else to get the feeling back. The worship creates a cycle of self-impoverishment.
Which leads us to the third pattern, money status.
Money status scripts equate a person's net worth directly with their self-worth. It is the belief that if something is not the absolute best or most expensive brand, it is not worth buying. The core tenet is that people are only as successful as the amount they earn.
Like money worship, this script predicts compulsive buying and gambling disorders as people desperately try to project an image of success. And while it is generally associated with lower income in the broader population, the researchers isolated a very specific, fascinating anomaly.
The ultra-wealthy.
Yes, individuals in the very top tiers of wealth and income in the United States actually score significantly higher in money status than the mass affluent or the middle class.
It is wild to think about. We often assume that once someone has $10 million, they just relax, they've made it. But the data shows this weird psychological spike.
It really does.
If your core script is that your human value is completely tied to your net worth, that becomes an incredibly powerful, almost terrifying motivator. It drives people to reach extreme tiers of wealth because they are literally running for their lives, psychologically speaking.
But the finish line keeps moving.
Exactly. The cost is that the finish line keeps moving. If your neighbor gets a bigger boat, your self-worth instantly plummets and you have to keep running.
And finally, we have the fourth pattern, which operates very differently from the other three. Money vigilance.
Money vigilance. This is a combination of intense watchfulness and extreme discretion. The beliefs sound like, you should never tell anyone how much money you have, or I would be an absolute nervous wreck if I didn't have a massive emergency fund.
Now, unlike the other three scripts, money vigilance actually appears to be a protective factor financially. It predicts a significantly lower likelihood of having revolving credit card debt, and it is strongly negatively associated with compulsive buying and gambling.
So they are good at saving.
Yeah, people with this script usually have healthy savings accounts.
But the word vigilance is key here. It means constantly being on guard. While this script protects your bank account, it generates an immense amount of internal anxiety and relational secrecy. You might have $1 million in the bank, but you lie awake at night terrified of a hypothetical medical bill.
Or you refuse to tell your spouse about an account because you fear they might spend it. The money is safe, but the human being is miserable.
So those four scripts, avoidance, worship, status, vigilance, give us the psychological framework. But where this research gets really profound is when we ask, how are these scripts physically formed in the brain in the first place? Why do some people develop avoidance while others develop vigilance?
To answer that, we turn to a really groundbreaking study published in the Journal of Financial Therapy by researchers Ross, Johnson, and Combs. They looked specifically at the neuroscience of trauma and attachment.
This study is crucial because it moves us from psychology into actual neurobiology. It explores how adverse childhood experiences, which the medical community refers to as ACEs, literally reroute the neural pathways in a developing brain.
ACEs include things like physical abuse, emotional neglect, verbal abuse, or growing up in highly unpredictable, developmentally harmful living conditions.
The researchers looked at a sample of 500 participants to track how these early traumas echo into our adult financial lives. And they didn't just ask people how they felt, they used a sophisticated statistical technique called structural equation modeling.
Which sounds incredibly dense, but it is essentially a way of drawing a literal mathematical map. It allows researchers to trace a path from a specific childhood memory through the nervous system straight to the physical anxiety someone feels when they open their banking app 30 years later.
And the map they drew is striking. Psychological trauma distorts a child's sense of self and creates a fundamental shift in their psychophysiology. It alters the limbic region of the brain, which is the emotional processing center that affects impulse regulation and threat detection.
And most importantly, it fundamentally impacts the child's attachment style to their caregivers.
Right. To give the listener some context here, we have to look back at John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth's famous psychological work on attachment theory. They defined three main ways children learn to connect with others.
First, there is secure attachment, where a parent is consistently responsive to the child's needs, so the child learns that the world is safe and people can be trusted.
It's the ideal.
Yeah. Then there is avoidant attachment, where a parent is consistently unavailable or emotionally unresponsive, so the child learns to just disconnect and rely entirely on themselves.
And finally, there is anxious attachment. This occurs when the caregiver is inconsistent. Sometimes they are warm and loving, other times they are absent, distracted, or angry. This creates a deeply painful pattern of uncertainty.
The child never knows what to expect.
The child desperately wants connection, but they are terrified of it because they never know which version of the caregiver they're going to get.
And here is the direct link to our invisible ledger. The Journal of Financial Therapy study found that experiencing early childhood trauma, specifically neglect, verbal abuse, and sexual abuse, is strongly associated with developing that anxious adult attachment style.
It rewires them.
The child learns, on a cellular level, that the world is unpredictable, that people will let them down, and that their needs might suddenly not be met.
And when you map that anxious attachment onto financial behavior, the results are just staggering. The researchers found that this anxious attachment style directly predicts severe maladaptive financial behaviors. Specifically, it leads to financial obsession.
Which is an attempt to control money to feel a fleeting sense of power.
Yes. And financial retention, which is an intense, chronic, painful worry about saving money.
It makes complete biological sense when you explain it that way. Trauma is associated with the breaking and rerouting of neuropathways. The deep emotional void left by a traumatic, unpredictable childhood is often managed by trying to exert absolute, rigid control over resources in adulthood.
Because it's the only thing they can control.
Right. If you were neglected as a child, hoarding money or obsessing over every single penny you spend isn't just a quirk of your personality. It is your brain's desperate, brilliant attempt to guarantee safety in a world it learned was fundamentally unsafe.
It's survival.
Exactly. The poor spending or extreme saving habits are literally physiologically embedded into your brain chemistry. It's a secondary pain management mechanism. When human social support fails us, money steps in as a proxy for safety.
It's heartbreaking, really. We judge people for being cheap or for being obsessed with money without ever realizing we might be looking at a trauma response. And this realization leads us to challenge another incredibly common, almost universally accepted money script that society pushes on us.
Oh, let me guess.
The idea that more money will automatically make us happier.
Yes. The ultimate money worship script at a societal level. We all have this magic number in our heads. For a very long time, the famous number in the cultural zeitgeist was $75,000.
I remember hearing that constantly.
People would say at dinner parties, science proves that once you make 75,000, your happiness plateaus. Any money beyond that doesn't matter for your well-being.
Yes. It came from a highly influential 2010 study by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, two heavyweights at Princeton. They analyzed massive amounts of Gallup poll data and found that while life evaluation, like how you think about your life overall, continued to rise with income, day-to-day emotional well-being, your actual daily happiness leveled off completely around that $75,000 mark.
It became absolute dogma. But then, a decade later in 2021, a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania named Matthew Killingsworth published a study that threw a massive wrench into that dogma. He used a custom smartphone app called Track Your Happiness.
Which is such a smart way to do it.
It was. Instead of asking people to remember how they felt last week, the app pinged people at random moments throughout the day and asked, how do you feel right now?
Which is a much more accurate way to measure real-time emotional states. We are terrible at remembering how we felt on Tuesday.
Exactly. And when Killingsworth crunched the data from over 1 million real-time reports, his data showed absolutely no plateau. Happiness just kept rising steadily with income, well beyond 75,000, into the hundreds of thousands.
So we had two completely conflicting scientific narratives from highly respected institutions. Does happiness plateau or does it keep climbing? And what I love about this story is that rather than just fighting it out in academic journals or attacking each other's credibility, Killingsworth and Kahneman engaged in something called an adversarial collaboration.
That's so rare in academia.
It is. They brought in a third-party arbiter, Professor Barbara Mellers, to sit down with both of them and reconcile their seemingly incompatible data sets.
It is a brilliant example of how intellectual humility and nuance change everything. When they dug deeply into the data, they realized they were looking at different parts of the human experience. They discovered that the original 2010 study, which showed the plateau, wasn't actually measuring general happiness at all.
It was measuring unhappiness. Let's really explain this because the analogy Killingsworth used to describe their breakthrough makes it so perfectly clear. He said, imagine you are a doctor administering a cognitive test for dementia. The test asks questions like, what year is it? And what is your name?
Basic questions.
Right. Most healthy people are going to pass it easily with a perfect score. Now, that test is fantastic at detecting if someone has severe cognitive dysfunction. But it cannot measure general intelligence. It cannot tell you who is an average thinker and who is a mathematical genius because every healthy person just hits the ceiling of the test immediately.
Precisely. Kahneman and Killingsworth realized that the 2010 Gallup data had essentially created a dementia test for happiness. The majority of people were reporting mostly perfect scores for day-to-day happiness. So the plateau they saw wasn't showing that everyone stops getting happier. It was actually just tracking the trend for the unhappy end of the distribution.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. When they applied this new understanding, the conflicting data sets reconciled perfectly.
So what does this actually mean for us, for our scripts, and for you, the listener? What is the real truth about money and happiness?
Well, the reconciled science shows that the happiness plateau is only real for a very specific group of people. For the unhappy minority of people who are suffering from clinical depression, severe heartbreak, profound loneliness, or deep emotional distress, happiness absolutely does rise with income up to a point, because money fundamentally alleviates the miseries and compounding stress of poverty.
It fixes the immediate threats.
Exactly. But for this group, once they hit around $100,000, it hard plateaus. If you are deeply internally miserable because of unhealed trauma or lack of human connection, throwing another $1 million at you will not cure your misery.
Money cures the misery of poverty, but it doesn't buy the emotional security we're actually craving.
But, and this is the massive shift, For the emotionally well-off majority, the people who are generally content, secure in their relationships, and mentally healthy, the plateau does not exist at all. For them, happiness actually accelerates as their wealth grows beyond 100,000. The more resources they have to facilitate their already healthy lives, the better they feel.
So the script, more money makes things better, is, again, only a partial truth. It depends entirely on your internal emotional state. If your foundation is cracked with unresolved trauma, anxious attachment, or a deep sense of unworthiness, pouring another $100,000 on top of it will not fix the doors that won't close. You'll just be a miserable person in a slightly larger house.
Yeah. Now that science has shown us this deep psychological blueprint, we need to shift our focus to the surface. We should look at how this unseen blueprint translates into the quiet, everyday patterns we build our lives around.
Let's look at the archetypes. When these deep KMSI scripts manifest in our daily personas, they create highly predictable behavioral patterns. Author Denise Duffield Thomas writes extensively about the 8 sacred money archetypes, and when you look closely, we can clearly see the underlying scripts running beneath them. Let's start by talking about the accumulator.
The accumulator archetype is driven almost entirely by the money vigilance script. These are the money-conscious savers, the ultimate bargain hunters. They are the people who will spend 3 hours researching a $20 purchase to make sure they get the absolute best deal.
They never pay full price.
Never. They have a natural, almost instinctual ability to create financial stability, and they rarely carry consumer debt.
On paper, they look like the ultimate financial success story. But their internal human experience is often exhausting. Their challenge is that they live in constant fear of destitution. They feel a great emotional connection, actual visceral anxiety and worry about spending. They get stuck in endless analysis paralysis.
Which researchers from the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business have studied extensively, and they refer to them clinically as tightwads.
Right. And the Michigan Ross studies revealed something incredible. They used neuroimaging to look at what happens in the brain when a tightwad makes a purchase. They found that tightwads experience literal physiological pain connected to the act of spending money.
Actual pain.
The pain centers of their brain, the insula, actually light up. It physically hurts them to part with resources. Even if they are incredibly financially secure, they operate from a traumatized script that says the safety net is never, ever big enough.
Imagine living like that. You have $500,000 invested, but buying a $5 coffee triggers the pain centers of your brain. And then on the exact opposite end of the behavioral spectrum, you have their romantic or the alchemist archetypes.
These personas are profoundly different. They are often driven by money worship or money avoidance scripts. They are the dreamers, the visionaries, the creatives. They are the people who believe the universe will just provide, that money will somehow sort itself out if they just keep a positive mindset.
The Michigan Ross researchers classify these individuals as spendthrifts. Unlike the accumulators, spendthrifts do not experience any pain of paying. The pain centers in their brains stay completely quiet during a transaction. The research found that because they lack that biological friction, they will often buy something even if they are only mildly interested in it.
Mild interest plus zero emotional deterrence is a dangerous recipe for regrettable purchases and creeping debt. They rely heavily on magical thinking. They might bounce from one business idea to another or one grand plan to the next, completely avoiding the logistical, granular details of their finances because looking at a spreadsheet feels too restrictive, too tedious, or too anxiety-inducing.
And then you have the celebrity or the ruler archetypes, which are heavily influenced by the money status script we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The celebrity archetype loves the spotlight. They love luxury goods, VIP experiences, and visible markers of success. They project an outward image of absolute flyless wealth.
But internally, it is often a completely different story. They are frequently using that luxury as a psychological shield. They overcompensate for childhood insecurities, a fear of being invisible, or a historical lack of unconditional love by buying status.
Trying to prove their worth.
Exactly. They harbor a deep, quiet terror that without the designer labels, the expensive car, or the outward markers of wealth, they are fundamentally inadequate and unlovable.
And what is genuinely alarming to me is how modern life is actively, systematically exacerbating all of these destructive patterns. We are living in an increasingly cashless society. We live in a world of digital money numbers on a screen, auto drafts, one-click ordering, contactless payments. And this technological shift creates what psychologists call the ownership gap.
This is a crucial concept explored in a brilliant piece in Psychology Today. The human brain processes physical, tangible information and abstract information in fundamentally different ways. Neuroimaging shows that concrete concepts, things you can actually touch, hold, and interact with, activate specific brain networks that help us construct mental models of the real world.
They feel real to us.
Right. But abstract concepts like a digital bank balance floating in the cloud engage entirely different brain regions involved in language processing and higher level theoretical thinking.
Think about the last time you handed a crisp, physical $100 bill to a cashier. You felt the texture of the paper, you saw it leave your hand, you watched it go into the register. It hurt a little bit, right? It felt real.
Yeah, you felt the loss.
Because digital money is just an abstraction. You log into a banking app and you see a string of digits. Logically, you know it means your mortgage is covered, but it doesn't feel like something you own in the same visceral way that holding a gold coin or a stack of bills does. It feels more like temporary access than actual ownership.
And this cognitive attachment weakens our psychological resistance to parting with money. Countless studies on digital payment psychology show that the physical act of handing over cash increases our awareness of spending and triggers that healthy friction. Digital transactions completely bypass that friction.
You don't feel anything.
No. So if you are a spendthrift or a celebrity archetype, the modern digital economy puts your most destructive money scripts on absolute autopilot. You tap your phone against a reader, you get the instant dopamine hit of acquiring the new item, but your brain barely registers that actual resources have been lost.
But exploring all of this raises a really important, challenging question. If we know these patterns are causing us deep pain, if the accumulator is exhausted and lonely from refusing to ever take a vacation with their family, or the celebrity is secretly drowning in crushing credit card debt despite looking flawless on Instagram, why do we keep doing it?
Yeah, when the pain becomes obvious, why don't we just stop?
We don't stop because human beings have a natural, deeply ingrained biological tendency to reinforce our established belief structures. We do not like being wrong. Cognitive biases act as an invisible hand guiding our decisions, constantly overriding our rational logic. The International Journal of Social Impact highlights two specific, powerful biases that lock us into these painful financial patterns.
The first one is confirmation bias.
Yes, confirmation bias means we actively constantly seek out environments, interactions, and information that prove our underlying money scripts are right, and we aggressively discount or ignore anything that challenges them. Let's play out a scenario. Imagine you have a script born from early betrayal that says you cannot trust anyone with money.
Okay, pretty common script.
Right. You go into a new business partnership. Because of your script, you will unconsciously act defensively from day one. You might withhold financial information, insist on controlling all the accounts, or make secret contingency plans.
And eventually, your new partner notices this secrecy. They feel the lack of trust. So naturally, they start acting cautiously and suspiciously toward you in return.
Exactly. And the moment they pull back or question you, your brain lights up. You point to their suspicion and say, "See, I knew I couldn't trust them. They're hiding something." You manifested the exact reality you feared because your cognitive bias filtered your behavior to guarantee that outcome. Your script remains perfectly intact, even as your business fails.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy orchestrated by the subconscious. And the second major bias trapping us is loss aversion, which is a cornerstone concept of prospect theory developed by Kahneman and Tversky back in 1979.
Loss aversion tells us a fundamental truth about human wiring. The psychological pain of losing something is far, far more acute than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. Finding $20 feels good. Losing $20 ruins your afternoon.
It really does.
In investing in finance, this manifests as something called the disposition effect. We hold on to losing investments or losing life strategies far longer than is mathematically rational.
We refuse to sell the crashing stock. Or, more broadly, we refuse to change our painful, destructive money habits. Because changing course requires our brain to do something incredibly painful, admit that we were wrong. It forces us to realize the loss and accept that we wasted time or resources. Our brain is simply trying to protect us from the acute psychological pain of that admission, so we stay on the sinking ship.
And this brings us to the pivot. This is the most vital, foundational part of our deep dive today.
I want to speak directly to you, the person listening to this right now. If you have recognized yourself in these patterns today, if you have hoarded cash in a savings account while wearing shoes with holes in them because you couldn't bear to spend, or if you have hidden a credit card statement from a partner because you were terrified of their reaction, or if you have exploded in a fight over a seemingly trivial expense like we saw with Dustin and Emily, you need to know something absolutely crucial.
Everyone's behavior around money, No matter how illogical, reckless, or guarded it seems on the surface, makes perfect logical sense when the underlying script is revealed.
We want to introduce you to a beautiful concept called the financial comfort zone. Think about your childhood. If you grew up in severe poverty or in a household where money was a constant source of terror, you likely adopted the script, don't spend money except on absolute life or death necessities. Now, in the context of your childhood, that behavior was not a flaw.
Not at all.
That was not a character defect. That was an absolutely brilliant, vital survival mechanism. It kept you alive when resources were dangerously scarce.
Or consider the multi-generational impact of these zones. If your grandparents lived through the Great Depression and lost all of their hard-earned money in a bank failure, they learned a permanent script. You cannot trust financial institutions.
Yeah.
So they kept literal cash stuffed inside a shoebox under the bed.
Which makes sense for them.
In the 1930s, that wasn't crazy paranoia. It was a highly adaptive, entirely logical response to a traumatizing systemic reality.
Sure.
And they unconsciously passed that nervous system response down to your parents who passed it to you.
So if you are an adult today, sitting on a pile of cash in a low-yield savings account because the mere thought of investing in the stock market terrifies you, your behavior is not a mathematical failure. It is not a lack of willpower, and it certainly isn't a lack of intelligence. It is simply an outdated adaptation. You are walking around wearing heavy, insulated winter gear in the middle of a beautiful summer because the winter you survived was so incredibly cold, you just haven't realized that the season has changed.
That is exactly it. When people experience a financial windfall or gradually move into a higher socioeconomic bracket, they are pushed physically out of their original financial comfort zone. The external environment changes, the bank balance changes, but the internal script remains locked in place. The goal here is not to shame yourself for the script. The script kept you safe. The goal is to gently, curiously bring awareness to it so you can expand that internal comfort zone to match your current reality.
Your behavior is not a flaw. It is something to understand. You are not broken. You are human.
And if we connect this understanding to the bigger picture, we have to look at how these internal scripts collide with the people we love. Because our scripts do not exist in a vacuum. We bring our tilted foundations into our marriages, our families, and our partnerships.
Which brings us back to a brilliant visual concept, Carl Richards' napkin drawing, which he calls the behavior gap. He draws a simple square on a napkin and writes, "My view of money," inside it. Right next to it, he draws a circle and writes, "Your view of money." When a square and a circle try to build a life together, try to buy a house or raise children, there's inevitably going to be friction.
And the friction occurs because we inherently assume our view, our shape, is the objective truth of the universe. Because our money scripts are automatic, involuntary, and formed before we could speak, we think, well, that's just how the world is. We assume our partner sees the exact same world.
And we don't even consider other shapes.
When the circle acts like a circle, we don't think they have a differently shaped script. We think they're being irrational, reckless, or controlling. We don't see their trauma, we just see their behavior.
Let's tie this back to the Journal of Financial Therapy study on transparency, because this is where relationships often fracture. We know statistically that couples who report frequent financial issues also report significantly lower relationship satisfaction overall. But the study found that financial transparency, meaning the actual amount of secrecy, trust, and open disclosure in a relationship, is directly impacted by those childhood ACEs and our early attachment styles.
Yes. The researchers found that individuals who hold maladaptive money beliefs, like financial obsession or a deep sense of inadequacy, report significantly less financial transparency with their partners. They are the ones who are statistically far more likely to hide purchases, maintain secret accounts, or lie outright about financial transactions.
On the surface, it looks like financial infidelity, but the crucial empathetic insight is why they hide it. When a person with an anxious attachment style, born from unresolved childhood trauma or neglect, lies to their spouse about money, it is rarely, if ever, actually about the money itself.
Secrecy is a protective measure. It is a wall built to keep pain out. It is born from a profound terror of vulnerability. If your earliest life experiences taught you that the people who are supposed to care for you are unpredictable, critical, or fundamentally unsafe, you will build walls. Hiding a credit card debt or hoarding secret savings is a desperate attempt to maintain autonomy.
To stay safe.
Exactly. It is a way to protect yourself from anticipated rejection, judgment, or abandonment. The financial secrecy is just the visible symptom. The root, is a deeply unhealed attachment wound.
And that leads us to the core truth of this entire exploration, the thing we hope you take away from everything we've discussed today. Money is never just a medium of exchange. It is a proxy. It stands in for love, for safety, for power, for belonging, and for our deepest, most vulnerable childhood needs.
Every argument about a monthly budget, every hidden receipt stuffed in a purse, every hesitation to invest in the future, it is all a reflection of how safe we feel in the world and how safe we feel in our relationships.
So let's take a slow breath and reflect on the journey we have taken together today. We all carry invisible scripts. They were written by people who came before us, formed in moments of childhood vulnerability, and shaped by the environments we had to survive.
These scripts dictate our daily patterns, they feed our cognitive biases, and they inevitably collide with the scripts of the people we love the most. But there is no right or wrong thinking here. We are all weird about money because money touches the most sensitive, primal parts of our human experience.
The next time you feel a sudden, intense surge of emotion around money, whether it is a wave of panic at the checkout line, a flash of defensive anger at a partner's perfectly reasonable request, or a desperate, undeniable urge to buy something you know you don't need, I want you to try something. Don't judge the feeling. Don't shame yourself for having it. Just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself one simple, quiet question. Whose voice is actually speaking right now?
If this conversation felt true for you, if something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one. We are building a community here, people who think about money differently, not as a number to chase, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this,
Yeah.
and we are genuinely glad you were here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.